students of class 6. Today we shall be doing the chapter Traveling with Grandfather's Zoo by Ruskin Bond. Now before moving on with the chapter, now let us have a look at a little bit about the author. Okay, so Ruskin Bond. Now Ruskin Bond is an Indian author of British descent. So he lives with his adopted family in Landor in Missouri, India, and he was born on 19th May 1934. So he is living in Kasauli in Himachal Pradesh. So the Indian Council for Indian Education has recognized his role in the growth of children's literature in India, and he received his education from Bishop Cotton School, Shimla in 1950. So he has written a lot of stories which is mainly associated with the children. It is something to do with the lives of the children. And many of his writings have also been made into books or TV shows. So some of them are The Blue Umbrella, Seven Kunmaf, The Black Cat, Junoon, and more. And besides that, he has also received some of the prestigious awards like the Sahitya Academy Award, the Padma Shri, and the Padma Bhushan. So these types of awards are given to those persons who have excelled in the field of literature. So this is your author, Ruskin Bond. So he has received a large amount of awards from the then President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. Now before going on with the chapter, now let's have a look at the characters who are there in this particular chapter, Traveling with Grandfather's Zoo. So firstly, we have the writer who is portrayed as a child. Then you have the grandfather, the grandmother, and there is a teenage tiger by the name of Timothy. There is a parrot by the name of Popeye, and there is a small squirrel by the name of Chips. And there is Aunt Mabel, and later on in the chapter, you will also come to know about the python or the snake. Now, before we continue with the chapter, now let me ask you a question. So when you are traveling, that means when you are planning for a journey, so what are the things which you prepare beforehand? That means some of you might be excited in carrying the different types of food items. So some of you might be excited in carrying magazines or story books so that you can read it throughout your journey. Or some of you might be interested in carrying a large amount of indoor games so that you can play it during the journey. Because most of the train journeys are quite tiresome. It is quite long, isn't it? So you cannot come out of the train. So you have to remain inside the train throughout the journey. So your journey might be boring. So for that reason, so people do various types of activities, maybe reading, maybe playing, singing, talking, etc. But in this particular story, the travel which the grandfather, the grandmother, and the author is making, it is a different type of a travel. Now, the story is about the narrator and his grandparents who traveled on the Lucknow Express from Dehra, that is Dehradun, to Lucknow, because the aunt was in Lucknow. So the grandfather, the grandmother, and the author, so they were going to Lucknow to stay there for some time, not on a permanent basis, but to stay there for a few days. Now, grandmother had insisted on taking her pet parrot. So she had a pet parrot and she used to call her Popeye. And then the grandfather also decided to take his teenage tiger pet, Timothy, and the narrator himself also wanted to take his pet squirrel by the name of Chips. But the grandmother had told grandfather before the journey not to take his pet python. Okay, because everyone would be scared of it. So they had left the pet python at home. So they were on their journey from Dera to Lucknow. Now, so they were traveling by train. Now, since it was easier for them to travel in the train with all the belongings, so they decided to travel in a train. Now, and besides that, now since the family was traveling with all their pets, so the grandfather had decided to book a ticket for the first class. So this was how a first class looks like. Okay? So with the 4 berths, so that each and everyone could sleep comfortably throughout the journey. So the grandfather had booked a first class ticket where you have the 4 berths. Now, so Timothy the tiger, okay, it belonged to the grandfather. Then the parrot, Popeye, she was the pet of grandmother, and the author, okay, he had his pet squirrel by the name of Chips. So now, before the journey began, now Timothy, which was a teenage tiger, now it had to behave well on the train, because in the train you have people from different backgrounds, isn't it? So you find different, or you come or you meet different kinds of people. So for that reason, Timothy had to behave well in the train. Now, but before they reached Lucknow, so many incidents took place on the way. That is, Popeye the parrot, what did it do? It objected to the vendors and the people. That means when you are traveling in a train, you see, isn't it? So many people will be trying to sell their articles, so they might be bringing their hands from the window and making the passengers buy all of those things. So when the vendors were trying to sell their products, so it seems that Popeye, okay, that is the parrot, it objected to the vendors. Maybe it did not like the vendors to sell their articles. And besides that, what Popeye did was, he even pinched the inspector's ear. That means when we are traveling in the train, so most of you might have had the experience of traveling in the train. So the ticket inspector comes to inspect the ticket, whether you are traveling with a proper ticket or not. So when the ticket inspector had come to inspect the ticket, so Popeye had pinched his ear as well. Okay. Now, the narrator had the pet squirrel. So it was moving all about in the compartment. Okay. And then it got friendly with most of the passengers, and the passengers started to offer it with a lot of roasted peanuts. So the squirrel was enjoying its journey from Dera to Lucknow, because it was friendly, it had become friendly with most of the people. Okay, so it was enjoying its journey from Dera to Lucknow, and then it was moving about and had become very friendly with the passengers. Now, the grandmother, now since she was old, maybe she was tired and maybe she wanted to sleep. Okay. She wanted to sleep, maybe she made her berth ready to go to sleep. But then what happened was, now the narrator felt hungry. Now he wanted to have food, because he had already known that the grandmother had prepared delicious food for the journey. Okay. Now she had prepared sandwiches, boiled eggs, a roast chicken and gooseberry spice for the journey. And they had carried few apples also. Okay. Now before the grandmother went to sleep, the grandfather had asked the grandmother whether she would like to have food or not. But the grandmother said that she had already taken soup before she started with the journey. So she decided to sleep rather than eat the food. So now the narrator was very excited to eat the food because maybe the grandmother was very expert in preparing very delicious dishes. Now, and all of these food items had been kept inside a tiffin basket and it had been placed beneath the berth. Now, the narrator, since he was very hungry, so he pulled the tiffin basket from underneath the berth and then he opened it. So maybe now he wanted to eat the food. But what happened was, as soon as he opened the basket, he found the grandfather's pet python curled up in the basket, okay? And he had already eaten all the food which was inside the basket and it was sleeping very contentedly. Now grandfather snapped the basket shut and pushed it back beneath the berth. Now grandfather must have got scared because the grandmother had already warned the grandfather in the beginning that he was not supposed to carry the pet python, isn't it? So as soon as the grandfather also saw the pet python, what he did was he closed the basket and again he pushed the basket underneath the berth. And then everyone went to sleep. Now, a little after midnight, there was a great clamor at the end of the corridor. So, in the middle of the night, they were woken up by some commotion which was taking place at the end of the corridor. Okay, grandfather and the narrator woke up. So, after hearing the sound, they must have got disturbed, isn't it? So, they got up. So, Timothy growled in his sleep. Though he was sleeping, he growled in his sleep, and Popeye made explaining noises. So what had happened was the python had made its way to the washroom and maybe after eating the food it must have felt thirsty, isn't it? So it made its way towards the washroom. So when the grandfather and the narrator woke up, so what they saw was a dozen of people had gathered around the washroom. So about 12 of them, okay. So the grandfather offered to help to take the python out. So he did not say that the python belonged to him, but he went and offered his help and brought the python back to his place, that is the compartment in which they were staying. He brought it back and stuffed it into the basket again, and again he placed the python inside the basket. But now the grandmother was awake. Now she came to know that the python had curled up, or the python had got into the food basket. And now she was concerned about Aunt Mabel, because Aunt Mabel, she was very scared of reptiles. Okay. Now if Aunt Mabel came to know that they had brought the pet python along with them, maybe she would feel very scared, isn't it? Or maybe now she would be screaming on top of her voice, isn't it? So because they had planned to share the house with Aunt Mabel in Lucknow, and then the grandmother knew that she was very scared of python. Now when they reached Lucknow, so that means the journey was almost coming to an end. So when they reached Lucknow, the aunt was waiting for them at the station. That means she had come to receive the passengers. That means the grandfather, the grandmother and the narrator at the station. Okay. Now, as soon as they reached home, she was excited to eat the food that had been prepared by the grandmother, because she had already seen the basket, isn't it? Now she was excited to eat the food that was prepared by the mother. So many a times also, if you are out of the house, or maybe you've been staying with your relatives for some time, what happens to you all? You long for the food which your mother usually prepares for you, isn't it? So here also maybe Aunt Mabel might be feeling the same. So So she might be longing to eat the food which was prepared by the grandmother. Now, what Aunt Mabel did was, she opened the tiffin basket thinking it contained scrumptious food. So now she was very excited as to what was inside the food basket. However, when she opened the tiffin basket, she saw the python and fainted. Okay? So he sees that the python is inside the food basket. Okay, so this was the python. You can see the size of the python, it is quite big. And then now as they reach home, the aunt opens the food basket, but what she finds is a python inside the tiffin basket. And then she faints. Okay. Now grandfather picked up the python, took it into the garden and draped it over a branch of a guava tree. Now the aunt fainted, isn't it? And then when she was in that unconscious state, the grandfather quickly picked up the python and draped it around the guava tree. Now, when Aunt Mabel recovered, she insisted that there was a huge snake inside the tiffin basket. Now, later, when she regained consciousness, she went on to say that there was a snake inside the tiffin basket. They showed her the empty basket and convinced her that she was seeing things because of the heat. And then the rest of the family members, they opened the food basket or the tiffin basket and showed it to Aunt Mabel, saying that there was nothing inside the food basket. It was empty. And then she must have seen the snake or the python because of the heat. Maybe the day was quite hot. And then they went on to tell her that because of the heat, she must be imagining things, or maybe she might be seeing things. So later on, she comes to know that it was for real, that there was a python or the snake inside the food basket. Okay, and then she begins to laugh, and the rest of the family also joins her in the laughter. Okay, so this was the story of the title. The title was Traveling with Grandfather's Zoo. So this is a summary of the chapter. So what I would like you to do is, please go through your textbook, read the chapter properly. Okay, so it's an easy chapter, only you'll be able to understand it very well. And afterwards, we will be sending you the assignment to the WhatsApp group. So till then, stay home, stay safe. Have a good day. Thank you.